lied about it, deceived people. That is, the ultimate greatest event in human history. And what's sad is that it's an utter truth, and very few people know about it. This great event, mankind's pride and unwillingness and fear of the other countries or whatever their excuse was, it's such a jewel. And until the world understands that this happened, the government or whoever behind the government who perpetrated this is going to keep doing the same or worse. They're going to be emboldened to keep on deceiving people.
Well, we got some people listening, and they're going to say, well, now, tell me, why do you believe we did not go to the moon? You've given that to me. You've given it so many times. Give it out now.
Well, the first thing you have to realize is that technology does not go backwards. I mean, we had the radio and then the TV and then, wireless communication, and then, the cell phone was big and expensive, and then it got smaller and cheaper. Everything gets faster and cheaper and better, everything. Airplanes, everything.
It works that with about all technology, doesn't it?
Correct. Now, Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic in 1928. The airplane was invented in the early 1900s. They, perfected it to a great degree in World War I with the biplane. And then their goal, like it was a goal to go to the moon, their goal with the airplane was to fly across the Atlantic Ocean, albeit the smallest ocean, if you will, fly from New York to France, right? And Lindbergh did that, in 1928. What you have to ask yourself is, would it be 50 more years until any nation on Earth would be able to build an airplane to fly across the Atlantic Ocean? Because that's what the U.S. is claiming, that in 1969, coming up on 40 years ago, they're claiming that they were able to go to the moon the very first time they tried, that it was easy to shoot the film pictures on the moon, to play golf on the moon, and that yet they won't be able to, in quotes, return to the moon until another 20 years from now. So they're saying 50 or 60 years it's going to take from doing it the first time to being able to do it the second time. And no nation on Earth, not the Soviet Union, not China, not Israel, not France, not England, not Japan, none of those technologically advanced countries is going to be able to repeat the event for at least half a century after they did it the first time. When the U.S. broke the sound barrier, the Soviet Union was right behind us in doing it. When the Soviet Union first put a man into space, we were right behind them in doing it. But the fact that no nation on Earth has been able to send a man to the moon or even beyond Earth's orbit, to orbit the moon, and that no one will be able to even repeat it except the country that claimed to do it first for more than half a century, it means for the first time in universal history, technology has gone backwards if the moon landings are real. The longer the time goes on between they claim to have gone until anybody repeats it, the more absurd the notion is. Unfortunately, the people hearing my words are the very nation that claim to do this event. Scientific theory says that you have to have independent verification to prove the event. No one in this country realizes that in nearly 40 years there has not been one single independent verification that the moon landings are real. Someone a few years back claimed to do cold fusion. And when another lab, from another country tried to do it by their recipe, it could not be done, which means they falsified it. That's the first reason. Then you just, it keeps building on from there. That the next one is that the space shuttle, which is the greatest, rocket that the U.S. has, only goes about 200 miles above the Earth. So if you had a foot globe, let's say a foot diameter globe, that would be an equivalent of about 1 inch above the globe. That's how far the space shuttle goes. Now, the moon would be an equivalent of 30 globes away. So we're talking about 1 inch above the globe today and 30 globes away nearly 40 years ago. That's a distance or difference of 100,000%. And they did it with 3 decades older technology, with less computing power on the moon rocket than I have in my $30 Walmart watch. That just doesn't make sense. And the fact that the space shuttle has killed 14 people only going 200 miles above the Earth, and yet they went 100,000% farther with 3 decades older technology and never killed anybody. Also, there's no independent press coverage. It's not like, the Holocaust, which, you could say, I'm a sane nut along with them who denied the Holocaust. The fact is,
I think for the sake of my audience, you better use a different illustration than the Holocaust.
Yeah, all I'm saying is that there are some people who throw us into that same boat, right? All I'm saying is that obviously that happened, and that happened on Earth in front of hundreds of millions of people, right?
No, we're not going to go there. Obviously, it.
Well, in any case, what I'm saying is that in the case of the moon landing, there were only 3 eyewitnesses, and there was no independent press coverage. There was simply a TV picture controlled by the federal government. Of the first 3 guys who went to the moon, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, 2 of the 3 have never given one-on-one interviews on the subject. In fact, there's not a single photograph of Neil Armstrong on the moon. People don't realize this. There's not a single still picture of Neil Armstrong as the first man to walk on the moon. He refused to have his picture taken. Now, their excuse is that he was taking all the pictures, and that's why he is not in them. Well, if you're going to the moon the first time, and there's 250 degrees, and there's micrometeorites, and all this other thing happening, you're probably going to want a backup camera, Then they claim that the lunar lander, something the size of a small bathroom, right, is sitting there in 250-degree temperature for 3, and on some of the missions, 5 days, and they are getting it down to a cool 72 degrees by powering air conditioning with car batteries. That's what they claim to have used. They claim to use liquid cell car-type batteries to power air conditioning.
And we're talking about
1969
nonstop batteries, too.
That's correct. And got it down to a pleasant 72 degrees. The fact is that von Braun, who designed the rocket, who first laid the groundwork for going to the moon, initially said that if you could get to the moon, number one, you'd have to build a space station first in order to ferry up fuel and supplies to reach the moon, that you could not do it in one trip. Secondly, he said that you would have to immediately, once you landed on the moon, to go into a cave, because there would be a 50% chance every 24 hours of a catastrophic failure due to micrometeorites. Then you go on to the fact that the administrator of NASA, who was about to achieve this great feather in his cap, resigned without explanation days before the first Apollo mission. Then, of course, Tricky Dick is president at the time, right? And then there's the photographic evidence. I'm a filmmaker. My job is to make fake scenes look real. So I look at the pictures and say, well, were these pictures taken with sunlight outside like they claim? There's no atmosphere on the moon, so the only lighting is sunlight. They claim it's 20 times brighter than a desert on Earth. So you don't need flash photography. You don't need lighting kits. You have plenty of light with the sun. Now, if you go outside on a cloudless day at noon and you and your friends stand beside one another, you'll notice that your shadows never intersect with one another. They are parallel, because you're a little dot here on Earth, and the sun is 92 million miles away and 1 million times bigger than the Earth. So the shadows never intersect. And some of the pictures on the moon, they intersect, sometimes at 90 degrees. You can see these pictures at moonmovie.com. Now, that's evidence alone right there that these pictures are not taken with sunlight. If they're not sunlight, that means they're artificial light. And if it's artificial light, it means they're on Earth and not on the moon. So you can even take the TV pictures, which are what convinced most people, and you see these guys kind of floating around. I'm a filmmaker, I think it looks pretty convincing. Yet, seeing how I have professional equipment, I just double or triple the speed of this, and you realize they were just using slow motion. They're only getting off the ground about 1 inch when they should be able to jump, 5 to 10 feet high because of the alleged difference in gravity. In fact, it's probably even greater than 1/6 the difference. That's based on the circumference of the moon, when in fact gravity is based not on circumference but on density. And because the Earth has a molten core and the moon does not, the moon is a lot less dense than the Earth. So it's probably more like 1/10 gravity. So they should be able to jump up, just amazingly high